So what are some things we can do to protect ourselves from the negative effects of stress? Well, one thing we can do is cope with our stress. But there are many different ways to conceptualize coping in the literature. And I'm going to talk about some that have been perhaps the most foundational. So I'd like you guys to just first think of a specific instance in your life when you were stressed, and then think about what you did to cope with that stress. As we continue with these slides, you guys can think about how you might characterize your coping strategy. So one way, and probably the predominant way that coping has been understood in the literature, is by differentiating problem-focused coping from emotion-focused coping. And this is part of Lazarus and Folkman's stress and coping theory. So here, problem-focused coping involves seeking advice, assistance, or information. You're really attempting to reduce stress directly by changing the stressor or the way that we interact with that stressor. Emotion-focused coping involves getting moral support, sympathy, or understanding. Here, you're attempting to reduce stress by avoiding or ignoring a stressor and attending to the emotional needs related to our stress reaction. So, all coping is used to reduce stress, and it does so by using emotional, cognitive, or behavioral methods. Now, the researchers, Lazarus and Folkman, emphasize that for coping strategies to be effective, they have to be working with the specific stressor. And again, they need to be understood within that person's contextual circumstances. So this is why it doesn't really work to think of coping as a fixed trait that someone has. You're not just like a good coper or a bad coper. The way that you cope depends on your stress. So the idea here is that problem-focused forms of coping are going to be better. It's going to make more sense to use problem-focused strategies when conditions are appraised as changeable, when you have some control over those situations. And then emotion-focused forms of coping are going to be more likely to occur when you've appraised that you have there's nothing you can do about the situation. There's nothing that can be done to modify that harmful, threatening, or challenging environmental condition. So this brings us then into a discussion of control. In both animals and humans, we know that uncontrollable threats trigger the strongest stress responses. So perceived loss of control can actually predict health problems. Losing control increases stress hormones. This increases blood pressure. This increases immunosuppressive effects, right? So you can see this pattern here. Increasing control has noticeably improved health and morale in prison and nursing home studies. So that's pretty amazing. We can also differentiate between an external locus of control and an internal locus of control. So this also maps on a little bit to that idea of growth versus fixed mindset. Those who have an external locus of control believe that chance or outside forces control their fate. So they don't feel like they have a lot of control over their situation. This is going to map on better to that fixed mindset. Those who have an internal locus of control believe that they do control their own destiny. And so this is going to map on better to that growth mindset. So there are things that we can do to help us be more resilient to stress, regardless of the specific type of stressor we are facing. So in this sense, we can work to expand our adaptive capacity. So there are things we can do to help us become better at dealing with stress when we do experience a stressor. And let's talk about some of those things. Social support. Social support can be really beneficial. It actually can even help fight illness because it helps mediate stress. So what we know is that social support can calm the cardiovascular system. It can lower blood pressure and stress hormone levels. And so this in turn it can fight illness by fostering a stronger immune functioning. So social support really buffers you from those negative effects of stress. Another thing that we can do is just get good sleep. Think about how you feel when you're sleep deprived. Virtually all forms of sleep deprivation result in negative mood states like fatigue, loss of vigor, sleepiness, confusion, irritability, anxiety, depression. After sleep deprivation, we only remember negative information. Studies have shown we don't remember the positive or neutral information. So the idea here is that we are so negative and stressed out and emotionally dysregulated when we're sleep deprived because sleep deprivation itself is a stressor. It's really a circular process. So we're stressed, cortisol is released. This impairs our cognition and emotion, making us more reactive, making us more likely to appraise events as stressful. And then this cortisol, in turn, inhibits our sleep. So sleep deprivation then results in greater cortisol. And this, again, impairs our cognition and emotion, making us more reactive. So it's a circular process here. Good sleep helps inhibit the release of cortisol, improving our cognition and emotion, and promoting better sleep and reducing stress. So sleep deprivation itself is a stressor, whereas good sleep can help make the individual less reactive to stress. We also see that exercise can protect us from the negative effects of stress. Studies have shown that sustained activity increases heart and lung fitness, reduces stress, reduces depression and anxiety. So what we know is that aerobic exercise really increases both the quality and the quantity of our life. Aerobic exercise increases arousal. It leads to muscle relaxation and sounder sleep. It triggers the production of neurotransmitters. It can relieve depression. And even in later life, it's associated with better cognitive functioning and longer life. So researchers have also found that those who exercise show less effects of chronic stress in their brain, specifically the hippocampus, which is related to memory. So as we saw, chronic stress has a negative impact on the brain. So exercise helps protect their brains from those negative effects of stress, particularly when it comes to memory. Blumenthal and colleagues showed that patients in exercise and stress management groups have lower general distress and depression than in a randomized control trial. So here's an example of a study. This is showing mildly depressed college women who participated in an aerobic exercise program showed markedly reduced depression compared with those who did relaxation exercises or received no treatment at all. So you can see here, those in the green, those were the groups who did the aerobic exercise. You can see that they have much less depression after treatment, even compared to those in the blue, which is the relaxation treatment group, or those in the red, which received no treatment. And we know that depression is related to stress. So again, getting good exercise can protect you both from the effects of stress as well as depression. And then eating healthy fats. So eating healthy is also very important. Eating healthy fats is especially important. This has been linked to fewer negative outcomes related to stress, like depression and anxiety. We know that dark chocolate in moderation is consistently related to decreases in the stress response. So, we see a lot of variation when it comes to physical and emotional health, particularly in midlife. And so part of the thinking here is that it comes back to this idea of allostatic load. So some midlife adults have greater allostatic load and are not managing their allostatic load well, and some have less. And we know that exercise and good diet account for a lot of the variability that we see here. So maintaining a good exercise regimen and a healthy diet can protect us from that allostatic load. And then the last thing that I want to talk about that can influence our reactions to stress in this part is faith. We see that there really is a faith factor here, with religiously active people tending to live longer than those who are not religiously active. And possible explanations here have to do with stress. So it's possible that having that faith factor can promote more healthy behaviors. It also helps you find more social support with the people who attend the same services, for example, as you. Helps you find more positive emotions. Those are often found among people who regularly attend religious services, and we know that positive emotions can also protect us from the negative effects of stress.